The golden sun rose over the hills, casting long shadows across the small town of Pinewood. Susan Miller walked out onto her porch with a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. This was her favorite time of day, when the world was still quiet and full of possibility. The morning air was crisp and cool against her skin. She took a deep breath, savoring the moment of peace before her busy day would begin. As the town science teacher, Susan loved inspiring young minds. But lately her thoughts had been elsewhere, drawn to the strange lights she had seen in the night sky. The news had been filled with reports of unusual phenomena across the globe, lights that moved in ways no human aircraft could. Governments dismissed them as weather balloons or experimental drones, but Susan knew better. Something extraordinary was happening. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the morning silence. A message from her friend, Olivia. Clark, the town sheriff. Come to the old Miller farm now, don't tell anyone. Susan frowned at the urgency in the message. She quickly went inside, dressed, and got into her old blue pickup truck. The drive to the Miller farm only took 15 minutes along winding country roads. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this connected to the lights? When she arrived, Olivia stood next to her police cruiser. Her normally calm face was pale with shock. "You need to see this," Olivia said, without greeting. She led Susan through the tall grass toward the back of the property. Susan gasped as they crested the small hill. In the center of the abandoned field sat a metallic object about the size of a school bus. Its surface gleamed with an iridescent purple sheen. "Unlike any metal Susan had ever seen." "Is that what I think it is?" Susan whispered. Olivia nodded. "I found it an hour ago. No one else knows yet. I wanted you to see it first. You always said they were real." Susan approached cautiously. The object had no visible seams or doors, just smooth metal that seemed to shimmer and change color slightly as clouds passed overhead. "Be careful," Olivia warned. "We don't know if it's safe." Susan reached out her hand, hovering inches from the surface. She could feel a slight warmth radiating from it. A scientist to her core, she couldn't resist the urge to touch it. Her fingertips made contact with the smooth metal. The surface rippled like water. The entire craft hummed to life. Lights that had been invisible before began to glow along its sides. Susan jumped back, but it was too late. A seam appeared in the side of the craft, widening into a doorway. Susan and Olivia froze, uncertain whether to run or stay. When a figure appeared in the doorway, they both gasped. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with slender limbs and blue skin that shimmered like the craft itself. Its head was slightly larger than a human's, with enormous almond-shaped eyes that were solid black. Its face had no nose, just small breathing slits and a thin line for a mouth. Susan felt her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. This was the discovery of a lifetime, proof that humanity was not alone. The alien stepped forward gracefully. Its movements were fluid, almost like it was floating. It raised a 6-fingered hand in what appeared to be a peaceful gesture. Susan mimicked the gesture, raising her own hand. The alien tilted its head, studying them. The three stood in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then, to Susan's shock, the alien spoke. "We have been watching your world for some time." The voice was feminine and melodic, though the alien's mouth barely moved. The words seemed to form directly in Susan's mind. "You speak English?" Susan asked, amazed. "I am communicating through thought patterns. Your brain interprets it as your language. I am Eridani, scout for..." The collective Olivia had recovered enough to speak. "Why are you here to observe mostly? Your species is young but interesting," Eridani replied. "But now circumstances have changed. I did not intend to reveal myself. It was an emergency landing." "Emergency?" Susan asked. "What happened?" "My craft was damaged by debris in your orbit. I must repair it and return to the mothership before." They continued. Eridani paused, suddenly turning her head as if listening to something. Susan and Olivia could not hear. "They are coming," Eridani said, urgency in her voice. "You must hide me." "Who is coming?" Olivia asked, her hand moving instinctively to the gun at her hip. "The Variks. Eridani said. They are hunters. They seek species like mine to capture and study. They are not like us. They do not observe. They take as if on cue. A low rumble filled the air. Susan looked up to see another craft much larger than Eridanus descending from the clouds. This one was angular with sharp edges and a dark metallic surface that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. You need to leave, Susan said to Eridani. Get back in your ship. It is too damaged to fly. Eridani replied, I need time to repair it. The dark ship hovered above them now, casting a shadow over the field. Olivia made a quick decision. Follow me, both of you. We need to hide. They ran toward the old barn at the edge of the property. The rumble grew louder as the Varric ship landed in the same field. Susan glanced back to see a hatch opening in its underside. Inside the barn, Olivia led them to a hidden cellar door, a relic from Prohibition days. They descended into the musty space as footsteps could be heard outside. Through a small crack in the cellar doors, Susan could see 3 figures emerging from the dark ship. They were humanoid but heavily armored. Their helmets concealed their faces completely. They moved with military precision, scanning the area, with devices in their hands. They will detect my biology. Eridani whispered. I should surrender myself to protect you. No, Susan said firmly. We're not giving you up to them. The Varric soldiers approached Eridanus' ship, examining it. One of them spoke in a harsh guttural language. The others nodded and began to spread out, searching the area. Susan looked around the cellar for anything that might help them. Her eyes fell on an old ham radio setup in the corner. Olivia. I need a diversion. Susan whispered. What are you thinking? Olivia asked. If the Varrics detect Eridanus' biology, maybe we can create a false reading, somehow draw them away from here. Susan quickly explained her plan. Using the old radio equipment, they might be able to create an electromagnetic pulse that could interfere with the Varric scanners. It was a long shot, but it might give them time to escape. Olivia nodded and began gathering the materials Susan needed. While they worked, Eridani watched with interest. Your technology is primitive, but your thinking is innovative, Eridani commented. The collective was right to find humans fascinating. Susan worked quickly, connecting wires and power sources. Her hands were steady despite the danger. The Varric soldiers were getting closer. She could hear their heavy footsteps above. Ready, Susan whispered to Olivia. Take Eridani out through the back tunnel. When I activate this, it should create enough interference to mask your escape. Get to my truck and drive to the old observatory on Pine Ridge. The equipment there might help us contact Eridanus people. But what about you? Olivia asked. He'll follow once. I've set this up. He'll make it look like Eridani went in another direction. Olivia looked like she wanted to argue but nodded. Instead, she guided Eridani toward the narrow tunnel at the back of the cellar. Susan waited until they were gone, then finished her makeshift device. It wasn't much, but it might work. She activated it and felt the hair on her arms stand up as the electromagnetic pulse spread outward. There was a moment of silence, followed by angry shouts from the Varric soldiers. Their scanners would be showing readings in all directions now, hopefully confusing them. Susan slipped out of the cellar and ran in the opposite direction from Olivia and Eridani. She needed to make noise, make herself seen. She picked up a branch and deliberately snapped it. One of the Varric soldiers turned toward the sound. Susan caught a glimpse of Eridani's distinctive blue skin disappearing into the trees in the distance. Good. They were almost away. The soldier approached Susan, raising some kind of weapon. Susan froze, uncertain what to do. She had hoped to lead them away, not get captured herself. Just as the soldier reached her, there was a blinding flash of light from the direction of Eridanus' ship. The soldier turned toward it, momentarily distracted. Susan took her chance and ran. She sprinted through the fields toward the road. Her truck was gone as planned. Olivia had taken Eridani to safety. Susan would have to find another way to the observatory. As she ran, she felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. In the span of a single morning, her entire understanding of the universe had changed. Aliens were real. some peaceful, some hostile, and somehow she, Susan Miller, small-town science teacher, had been thrust into the middle of what might be first contact or the beginning of something much more dangerous. Behind her, the Variks continued their search, but Susan had a head start and a destination. The old observatory had been her special place since childhood. It had powerful equipment that might just help them contact Eridanus people, and more importantly, it was isolated. No innocent bystanders would be in danger. There Susan ran faster than she ever had before. Her world had changed, and now she needed to change with it. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Susan ran through the dense forest, her lungs burning with each breath. The sounds of the Varik soldiers grew fainter behind her, but she didn't slow down. Her mind raced as fast as her feet, trying to process everything that had happened. First contact with an alien being. And not just one species, but two. One peaceful and one hostile. The implications were staggering. After nearly an hour of running and walking, Susan reached the main road. She was miles from town with no phone. The battery had died. During her escape, the observatory was still another 5 miles uphill. She would have to hitchhike. Susan stuck out her thumb as an old red truck approached. The driver, a middle-aged woman named Ellen, who ran the local diner, slowed down. Susan Miller. "What on earth are you doing out here?" Ellen asked as Susan climbed into the passenger seat. "Car trouble." Susan lied. "Can you take me to the observatory?" Ellen raised an eyebrow but didn't question further. Susan was grateful for small-town courtesy where people helped first and asked questions later. As they drove, Susan caught glimpses of unusual activity. Military vehicles heading toward the Miller farm, black helicopters circling the area. The government had responded quickly. At the observatory, Susan thanked Ellen and watched her drive away before hurrying inside. The old building had been partially automated years ago and was rarely staffed these days. Susan used her key, a privilege from her years of bringing students here for night sky viewings. Inside, she found Olivia and Eridani waiting for her. The alien was examining the observatory equipment with obvious interest. "You made it," Olivia said, relief evident in her voice. "Barely," Susan replied. "The Variks are still searching. And now, the military is involved too." Eridani turned from the equipment. "I have been analyzing your radio telescope. It is primitive, but with modifications, it might reach the frequency needed to contact my ship. Can you make these modifications?" Susan asked. "With your help." "Yes," Eridani replied. "And we must hurry. The Variks will not give up easily. They are persistent hunters." Susan and Eridani worked together, modifying the observatory equipment. The aliens' knowledge was far beyond human understanding, but Susan caught on quickly, adapting their outdated technology in ways she never thought possible. As they worked, Eridani explained more about the two species. The collective. "My people have been studying Earth for centuries. We observe, document, learn. We believe in peaceful coexistence and non-interference." And the Variks, Olivia asked from her position by the window where she kept watch. "They are collectors. They study through capture and dissection," Eridani said. "They see other species as specimens, not equals. They have collected samples from thousands of worlds, sometimes individuals, sometimes entire populations." Susan paused in her work to process this. The Variks were poachers on a galactic scale, and now they were here on Earth where one ship landed. Others might follow. "We need to warn people," Susan said. Eridani shook her head. "That would be unwise. The revelation of extraterrestrial life would cause panic among your people, and the Variks would see it as an opportunity. They thrive on chaos. But we can't just do nothing." Olivia protested. "First, we contact my ship," Eridani said. "Once I am safely away, the Variks will likely follow. They are primarily interested in my species, not yours." Susan wasn't convinced. The Variks had seemed very interested in the farm, searching thoroughly even after Eridanus' ship was found. A sudden noise outside made them all freeze. Olivia peered through the blinds. Military vehicles. "Susan, we have company." Susan looked at their half-finished work. "We need more time." Olivia checked. "Her service weapon, I can buy you some time, but not much." Before Susan could protest, Olivia was out the door. Susan turned back to the modifications, working faster now. Her hands moved with newfound precision, following Eridanus' instructions. Outside, they heard Olivia's voice greeting the soldiers, claiming she was investigating suspicious activity as the town sheriff. It wouldn't fool them for long. Eridani connected the final wires. The modified radio telescope hummed to life, emitting signals at frequencies no human equipment was designed to reach. Now we wait, Eridani said. The wait was short. Within minutes a response came. The equipment translated it into audible sound that Eridani seemed to understand. They are coming, Eridani said. My ship will arrive within 1 rotation of your planet. That's not soon enough, Susan said, looking toward the window where she could see Olivia still talking with the military personnel. They were becoming visibly suspicious. Eridani considered this. You are right. We need an alternative. The alien moved to a computer terminal and began typing faster than any human could. The screen filled with complex equations and diagrams. What are you doing? Susan asked. Creating a blueprint. Your technology is sufficient to build a basic cloaking device. It will not last long, but it might hide us until my ship arrives. Susan watched in amazement as the alien's knowledge flowed through the primitive human computer. The design was ingenious, using basic components in ways Susan never would have imagined. We need parts, Susan said, looking at the blueprint. Some of these we have here, but others. Eridani pointed to the emergency generator in the corner of the room. That contains most of what we need. Susan began disassembling the generator, carefully following the blueprint on the screen. She had never built anything like this before, but the design was elegant in its simplicity. Using principles of physics Susan understood but applied in novel ways. Outside voices were getting louder. The military was not buying Olivia's story. They will search the building soon, Eridani said. Susan worked faster, connecting wires, arranging components, following the alien's instructions. The device took shape, a small metallic disc with an intricate pattern of circuits. Just as she connected the final wire, the observatory door burst open. Military personnel flooded in. Weapons raised, Olivia was escorted in behind them, her hands raised. Nobody move. A commanding officer ordered her, eyes widening at the sight of Eridani. Susan looked down at the device in her hands. It was complete but untested. She pressed the central button. The effect was immediate. A ripple of energy spread outward from the device, washing over Susan, Eridani, and Olivia. The soldiers froze, looking around in confusion. Where did they go? One shouted. They were just here. Susan held her breath, though. Standing in plain sight, the soldiers looked right through them. The cloaking device had worked, bending light around them, rendering them invisible. The military searched the observatory but found nothing. Their frustration grew as minutes passed. Susan gestured silently to Eridani and Olivia, pointing toward the back door. They moved slowly, carefully, avoiding contact with the searching soldiers. Each step was tense. Any sound, any touch could give them away. They made it outside, slipping past the guards positioned around the building. The cloaking field moved with them, maintaining their invisibility. Once, they were a safe distance from the observatory. Susan whispered. How long will this last? A few hours at most, Eridani replied. The power source is limited. They needed to find shelter somewhere to wait for Eridanus' ship. The forest offered cover, but the military would surely begin searching there soon. The caves, Olivia suggested. There are natural caves in the hills beyond the observatory. The military won't know about them. They're not on any maps. It was their best option. Susan led the way, moving deeper into the forest toward the hills. The cloaking device hummed softly in her hand, a reminder of their precarious invisibility. As they hiked, Eridani explained more about the situation. The Variks found me by accident. They were not searching for me specifically. They detected my ship's energy signature when I was forced to land. Then why are they so determined to find you? Olivia asked. Because now they know the collective is observing Earth. Eridani explained. The collective and the Variks have been in conflict for millennia. We try to protect developing worlds from their harvesting. The Variks see us as interference. Susan thought about this. They were caught in the middle of an ancient alien conflict, one that had suddenly made Earth its newest battleground. After an hour of hiking, they reached the caves. Hidden behind thick vegetation, the entrance was barely visible. Susan had discovered these caves years ago while hiking. They had become her secret retreat, a place to think inside. The main cavern, they deactivated the cloaking device to conserve power. The cave was cool and damp with natural rock formations creating separate chambers. Now we wait, Eridani said. My ship will arrive after your sun sets. Susan checked her watch. That was still hours away. And there was no guarantee the military or the Variks wouldn't find them before then. Olivia sat on a rock, her expression troubled. You know they won't stop looking for us, she said. The military saw Eridani. They know there's an alien. On Earth, that changes everything. Susan nodded. The world was about to change forever. First contact had always been theoretical. A question of when, not if. But Susan had never imagined it would happen like this in her small town, with her at the center for. Now, though they had to survive the next few hours, the military was searching. The Variks were hunting, and they were hiding in a cave with an alien waiting for rescue. Susan looked at Eridani, who was examining the cave walls with curiosity. Despite everything, there was still wonder in this moment. Humans were not alone in the universe, and Susan Miller, small-town science teacher, was one of the first to know it. Inside the cave, the hours passed with agonizing slowness. Susan, Olivia, and Eridani took turns watching the entrance for any sign of their pursuers. The faint sound of helicopters occasionally passed overhead, but so far they remained undiscovered. Susan used the time to learn more about their alien companion, Eridani, seemed equally curious about humans, asking questions about Earth culture and history. Your species is young but remarkably adaptable, Eridani observed. You have accomplished much in a short time. Susan smiled, thinking about human history with all its triumphs and failures. We're still figuring things out, she admitted. We make a lot of mistakes. That is the way of all intelligent life. Eridani said, the collective has records of thousands of civilizations. Each follows a similar path. Learning, growth, conflict resolution. Sometimes destruction. And where is humanity on this path? Olivia asked at a crucial juncture. Eridani replied, your technology has advanced to the point where you can either thrive or cause your own extinction. You have the tools to solve your greatest problems or create new ones. Susan thought about climate change, nuclear weapons, and other existential threats humans faced. It was sobering to hear an outside perspective. The Variks see this moment as an opportunity. Eridani continued, they prefer to harvest species at this stage of development when they have achieved sufficient technological advancement, but before they can effectively defend themselves. Susan felt a chill run down her spine. Harvest. What exactly does that mean? Eridani hesitated before answering. A strange expression crossed her face. She tilted her head as if listening. Someone approaches, she whispered. They quickly activated the cloaking device, pressing themselves against the cave wall. A moment later, a beam of light cut through the darkness. A soldier moved carefully into the cave, sweeping his flashlight across the walls. Susan held her breath as the light passed over them. The soldier moved deeper into the cave, checking each chamber methodically. He spoke into a radio cave complex located in Sector 7. Commencing search, more soldiers would be coming. They needed to move. Susan caught Olivia's eye and gestured toward the back of the cave. There was another exit, a tight squeeze through a passage she had discovered years ago. They moved silently, keeping distance from the soldier. The passage was at the very back of the cave behind a large rock formation. Susan led them to it. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for a human. Eridani, who was taller and more slender than a human, would struggle. You go first, Susan whispered to Eridani. Show her the way, Olivia. Eridani examined the tight passage, then began to change. Her body seemed to become more fluid, her bones shifting beneath her skin. Within seconds she had transformed, becoming shorter, more compact. Susan and Olivia stared in shock. We can change our physical form within limits. Eridani explained, her voice now slightly different. To better adapt to environments, Olivia shook off her surprise and led Eridani into the passage Susan followed, last looking back to make sure they weren't being followed. The soldier was still searching the main chamber, unaware of their escape. The passage twisted and turned, forcing them to crawl in some sections. After several tense minutes, they emerged on the other side of the hill. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. We need to keep moving, Olivia said. We'll find the passage eventually. Susan checked the cloaking device. The power indicator was blinking, warning them it wouldn't last much longer. Where to now? She asked. We need height, Eridani said, looking up at the sky. My ship will need to locate me. The cloaking device blocks their sensors too. The mountain peak. Susan suggested it would give them the highest point in the area and good visibility in all directions. They began climbing higher, staying under the cover of trees. The forest was dense, here providing good cover from the helicopters still circling the area. The cloaking device continued to hide them, but its power was fading fast. As they climbed, Eridani suddenly stopped. Her eyes focused on something in the distance. Varric, she said, pointing to a clearing below. Susan and Olivia followed her gaze. 3 Varric soldiers stood in the clearing. Their armor gleamed in the fading sunlight. They were scanning the area with handheld devices. The cloaking device flickered briefly. The power was almost gone. We need to move faster, Susan urged. They continued their climb, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. Just as they reached the summit, the cloaking device gave out with a soft whine. They were visible again, exposed on the mountaintop. The sun had set completely now, darkness falling over the forest. The first stars were becoming visible in the night sky. Eridani looked up, searching the stars. My ship will be here soon, she said. They will detect me once I activate my beacon. And so, will the Varrics, Olivia pointed out. Susan scanned the area. The military helicopters were concentrated around the observatory and the caves. The Varrics were still in the clearing below, but would surely detect Eridanus' beacon once activated. We need a distraction, she said. Olivia nodded. I can create one. She checked her service weapon. I still have a full clip. No, Susan said quickly. That's too dangerous. There has to be another way. Susan thought quickly, looking around for anything they could use. Her eyes fell on the forest ranger station about halfway down the mountain. It would have emergency flares. If we set off flares on the other side of the mountain, it might draw them away long enough for Eridanus' ship to land. It was a risky plan, but better than a direct confrontation. They made their way to the ranger station, breaking in through a window. Inside, Susan found the emergency kit with flares. Now, we need to split up, Olivia said. I can move faster on my own. I'll take the flares to the north ridge and set them off. You two stay here and wait for the ship. Susan wanted to argue, but knew Olivia was right. The sheriff was trained for situations like this. Well, as much as anyone could be trained for an alien encounter. Be careful, Susan said. As Olivia took the flares and disappeared into the darkness, Susan and Eridani returned to the summit, hiding as best they could behind rocks and trees. They watched as Olivia's tiny figure moved across the opposite ridge. There, Eridani pointed to the sky. A light was moving against the starfield, approaching rapidly. Is that your ship? Susan asked. Eridani nodded. It is smaller than the mothership, a retrieval craft. Suddenly, flares erupted on the northern ridge, brilliant red light illuminating the night sky. The effect was immediate. The military helicopters changed course, heading toward the flares. The Varrics in the clearing below also turned their attention to the disturbance. Now Eridani activated her beacon. A soft blue light pulsed from a device on her wrist. The light in the sky changed direction, moving directly toward them. It grew larger, descending rapidly. The ship was sleek and silent, unlike anything human technology could create. It hovered above the summit. A hatch opening. In its underside, come, Eridani said. A beam of light extended from the ship, creating a path upward. Susan hesitated. This was it. First contact. The human race would never be the same after tonight. And she, Susan Miller, had been chosen to experience it. Something caught her attention. Movement in the trees. The Variks had not all been distracted. Some were approaching the summit, weapons ready go. Susan urged Eridani. You need to leave. Now Eridani looked at the approaching Variks, then back at Susan. I cannot leave. You to face them. They will have questions. You know too much. Before Susan could respond, Eridani made a decision. The beam of light extended wider, encompassing both of them. They began to rise toward the ship. Susan felt weightless, suspended in the light beam. The ground fell away below them. Just as they were about to reach the ship, Susan saw Olivia running toward the summit, pursued by Varik soldiers. Stop. Susan called out. We need to wait for Olivia. Eridani hesitated, then adjusted the beam. To hold their position, the ship remained hovering, the hatch open. Olivia sprinted the last few yards to the summit, Varik's energy weapons firing around her. The light beam expanded again, catching her just as she reached them. All three rose into the ship, the hatch closing beneath them. The interior was brightly lit with smooth curved walls, unlike any human craft Susan had ever seen. Eridani moved to a control panel, touching symbols that lit up beneath her fingers. The ship accelerated upward. Susan went to Olivia, who was breathing hard but unharmed. They looked at each other in amazement. They were on an alien spacecraft leaving Earth through a viewport. Susan watched as their planet grew smaller. Mountain forest town, all receding into the distance. It was breathtakingly beautiful, the curve of the Earth becoming visible against the blackness of space. What now? Susan asked, turning to Eridani. We rendezvous with the mothership. Eridani replied. Then we must decide what to do with you. The implication wasn't lost on Susan. They were effectively captives now, albeit willing ones. They had escaped the Variks and the military. But at what cost would they ever return to Earth? The journey to the mothership was brief. The small craft docking with a much larger vessel that had been hidden on the dark side of the moon. Susan and Olivia followed Eridani through gleaming corridors, passing other aliens of Eridani's species who regarded the humans with obvious curiosity. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a command center. A tall, dignified alien turned to greet them. Eridani, you have brought humans aboard, the elder said, her tone neutral but with a hint of disapproval. They helped me escape the Variks. Eridani explained. They risked their lives. The elder studied Susan and Olivia with large, unblinking eyes. This complicates matters, she said. The humans were not supposed to know of our presence, not yet. Susan stared at the holographic Earth floating before her. The weight of the elder's question pressed down on her shoulders. Was humanity ready for first contact? Ready to learn they were part of a larger galactic community, with all its wonders and dangers? She looked at Olivia, who seemed equally overwhelmed by the responsibility. I don't know, Susan finally admitted. I want to say yes, that we are ready. But the truth is more complicated. Some would welcome you with open minds. Others would react with fear or hostility. The elder nodded as if this was the answer she expected. Human history is filled with examples of both. She said, we have observed your wars, your prejudices, your divisions. But we have also seen great compassion, innovation, and cooperation. Olivia stepped forward. The military has already seen Eridani, she said. The secret is partially out. Whatever you decide, people will know something happened. Another alien joined the conversation. This one was shorter than Eridani, with deeper, blue skin marked with silver patterns. The Variks will not remain silent either, she said. They will make their presence known if it serves their purpose. Susan felt a chill. How many Varik ships are there, she asked. Only one scout ship for now, the new alien replied. But they will call for others, they always do. The Variks operate in waves. First scouts, then collectors, then, if the species is deemed valuable, harvesters. Susan repeated the ominous word. What exactly do they harvest? The elder exchanged glances with the others before answering. Genetic material. Primarily, they collect and catalog DNA from species across the galaxy. In some cases, they take samples. In others, they take entire populations. Susan felt sick. They were talking about abduction experimentation, possibly extinction-level events, and Earth was their new target. We need to warn people. Susan said we need to prepare. The elder raised a six-fingered hand. That is precisely the question before us. Do we help humanity, prepare openly revealing ourselves in the process? Or do we work in the shadows as we have for centuries? A debate broke out among the aliens, some arguing for open contact, others for continued secrecy. Susan and Olivia listened, trying to follow the complex discussion. Eventually, Eridani approached them. While the council debates, she said, "I can show you something that might help you understand." She led them to another chamber, this one containing what appeared to be historical archives. Eridani activated a display showing a planet similar to Earth but with purple oceans and red vegetation. This was Lysithea, she explained. Another world, the Variks targeted. They were approximately at your technological level. The display showed cities, towns, civilization much like Earth. Then came images of Varik ships descending, collection facilities being established, and finally resistance. The Lysithians fought bravely, Eridani said, but they were unprepared. The Variks took what they wanted and left. The planet is now largely abandoned. Susan watched in horror as an entire civilization was systematically dismantled. Is this what the Variks planned for Earth? Not necessarily. Eridani said Earth has something. Lysithea did not. What Susan asked, the collective, she replied. We have been studying your world for centuries longer than most. We see potential in humanity. The same adaptability that has allowed you to survive and thrive on your world could help you face the Variks. But you need to be united. Unity had never been humanity's strong suit. Susan thought of all the divisions on Earth, nations, religions, ideologies. It seemed impossible that humanity would come together even in the face of an alien threat. Eridani seemed to read her thoughts. There is another option. She said, we have helped other species before. Guided them, prepared them without full disclosure. Susan considered this. A middle path. Not complete revelation, but not complete secrecy either. Before she could respond, an alarm sounded. Throughout the ship, Eridani looked up concern on her alien features. The Variks ship is leaving orbit, she explained. They are returning to their fleet. This should be good news, Susan said. Eridani shook her head. They will return in greater numbers. The scout has completed its assessment. Earth has been marked for collection. They hurried back to the council chamber where the elder and others were monitoring the situation. The Variks scout has transmitted its findings. The elder said, their main fleet will arrive within one rotation of your planet one day. Susan translated, that's all the time they had. A decision has been made. The elder announced, we will offer humanity limited assistance technology to detect and potentially defend against the Variks, but we will not reveal ourselves fully. Not yet. Susan frowned. That doesn't seem like enough. The elder turned to her. The collective cannot fight your battles. Human independence is crucial. If we simply solve this problem for you, your species will become dependent, vulnerable. We can offer tools, knowledge, but how you use them must be your choice. It made sense in a way, though. Susan wished they would do more. Preparations are already underway. The elder continued. We have activated our agents. On Earth agents, Susan asked, surprised humans who have been aware of our existence for some time. The elder explained. They have been positioned in key organizations, governments, scientific institutions. They will help distribute the technology and knowledge and us. Susan asked, what happens to Olivia and me? You have seen too much to simply return. The elder said, but your knowledge could be valuable to your people. We offer you a choice. Remain here with the collective as ambassadors and observers, or return to Earth with knowledge and technology to help prepare humanity. It was a monumental decision. To stay among the stars learning about alien civilizations, or to return home with the burden of partial knowledge. Neither choice was easy. Susan looked at Olivia. The sheriff nodded slightly. They had always been in agreement. We need to go back. Susan said, Earth is our home. Our people need us, especially now. The elder nodded as if expecting this answer. The necessary preparations will be made, but understand once you return you will be pursued, both by your own government and eventually by the Variks. Your lives will never be the same. Small price to pay if it helps save our world, Olivia said. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Susan and Olivia were given crash courses in alien technology, focusing on Variks detection systems and defensive measures. The information was overwhelming, but Susan absorbed as much as she could, knowing lives would depend on it. They were also given small devices to implant beneath their skin. These would allow the collective to track and communicate with them after their return. When the time came to leave, Eridani accompanied them to the small shuttle that would return them to Earth. I wish I could go with you, she said, but my presence would only complicate matters. Susan hugged the alien, an unexpected gesture that seemed to surprise and please Eridani. Thank you, she said, for everything. The shuttle journey was brief. The craft was designed to avoid human detection systems. They would land in a remote area miles from Pinewood, giving them time to make their way back gradually. As Earth grew larger in the viewport, Susan felt a mix of emotions: relief at returning home, fear for what was coming, determination to make a difference. The shuttle landed silently in a forest clearing. The door opened, revealing the familiar scent of pine and earth. The stars overhead looked the same as they always had, but Susan would never see them the same way. Again, Eridani gave them final instructions. A contact in the nearest city would provide them with resources, identification documents, transportation. They would need to stay hidden from authorities, at least initially. Their implanted devices activated, showing a holographic map with a route marked. The technology was concealed, designed to appear only when they were alone. Are you ready? Olivia asked as they prepared to disembark. As ready as I can be. Susan replied, the fate of humanity potentially rests on what we do in the next 24 hours. No pressure. They stepped out onto Earth soil once more. The shuttle door closed behind them, and the craft rose silently, disappearing into the night sky. They were alone, two humans with alien technology and knowledge of an impending invasion. Their own government was looking for them. The Variks would be returning in force. And somehow they needed to help prepare humanity for what was coming. Susan checked the holographic map. The nearest town was 15 miles away. They would need to walk through the night. Let's go, she said, taking the first step on their new journey. This is just the beginning, Olivia nodded, falling into step beside her. The two women moved through the forest under the light of the stars. No longer just a teacher and a sheriff, but messengers with the most important news in human history. Above them, unseen but present, the collective ships maintained their vigil, watching, waiting, ready to offer limited assistance, but ultimately leaving humanity's fate in human hands. The clock was ticking, the Variks were coming, and Earth would never be the same again. Dawn broke over the horizon as Susan and Olivia reached the outskirts of a small town. Their muscles ached from the long hike, but determination kept them moving. The holographic map led them to a nondescript motel on the edge of town, room 13. The contact would be waiting. They knocked on the door, unsure what to expect. It opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a practical haircut, Laura Nelson. She introduced herself briefly. No time for pleasantries. Come inside quickly, they go. Room was ordinary except for several cases of equipment stacked neatly against one wall. Laura locked the door behind them and drew the curtains. I've been working with the collective for 15 years. She explained. I was beginning to think they would never make direct contact. Then everything changed overnight. Susan and Olivia took turns explaining what had happened. Their encounter with Eridani, the Variks, the decision of the collective. Laura listened intently. One day, she said when they finished, that doesn't give us much time. She opened one of the cases, revealing what looked like modified laptops and communication devices. These contained the detection technology the collective provided, she explained. They can identify Varix energy signatures from a distance. We've been distributing them to key individuals for years, but now we need wider deployment. How many of you are there? Olivia asked. Human agents working with the collective. Laura considered the question. Hundreds, maybe 1,000 spread throughout governments, scientific institutions, military complexes. We maintain cover identities, live normal lives, but prepare for this moment. Susan examined the equipment. This won't be enough, she said. Not against a fleet. No, Laura agreed. But it's a start. The collective believes humanity must develop its own defensive measures. They can guide us, but not fight for us. She opened another case. This contains schematics for defensive technology. It can be built with existing human materials, but the designs are far beyond our current science. The hard part will be convincing the right people to build it. That's where you come in, Susan realized. Laura nodded. You two have first-hand experience with both the collective and the Varix. Your testimony will be crucial, but the government is looking for us. Olivia pointed out. We're fugitives, all part of the plan. Laura smiled. They want to find you, so we let them. But on our terms. She handed them new clothes and identification. You're old. Identities are compromised. These will get you where you need to go. Where exactly are we going? Susan asked. Washington, D.C., Laura said. Straight to the top. While they cleaned up and changed, Laura explained the plan. A select group of government officials would be gathered, some aware of the alien presence, others. Not. Susan and Olivia would present their evidence along with the detection technology and defensive schematics. What about the Varix? Susan asked. When their fleet arrives. Laura's expression darkened. We need to be ready before then. With enough detection systems in place, we might be able to track their approach. Buy more time. They left the motel in a nondescript sedan. Laura, driving, Susan studied the passing landscape, wondering how many people they passed had any idea what was coming. How would they react when they learned the truth? Their journey was interrupted when a roadblock appeared ahead. Military vehicles blocked the highway. They found us, Olivia said. Laura remained calm. This was expected, she said. They've been tracking the energy signatures from your implants. She turned off the main road, navigating back roads with practiced ease. A helicopter appeared overhead following their movement. We can't outrun them. Susan said. We're not trying to, Laura replied. Just making sure we meet the right people. She pressed a button on the dashboard, sending a signal. Within minutes, black SUVs converged on their location surrounding the car. Men in suits approached, weapons visible but not raised. A tall woman stepped forward, identifying herself as Agent Diana Hayes, National Security Agency. Laura rolled down her window. You took your time, Diana. The agent almost smiled. Almost. We've been tracking your movements since they returned to Earth. The military wants custody. Not happening. Laura replied. You know the arrangement, Agent. Hayes nodded reluctantly. The president is waiting. They were transferred to the government vehicles and driven at high speed toward a military airfield. A jet-weighted engines already running. Within 30 minutes, they were airborne, heading for Washington. Susan watched the landscape pass below them, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been a science teacher. Today, she was flying to meet the president with alien technology and warnings of an invasion. On the plane, Agent Hayes debriefed them, recording their accounts of everything that had happened. Her questions were precise, professional. But Susan could see the wonder and fear behind her official demeanor. You're taking this very calmly, Susan observed Agent. Hayes glanced at Laura before answering. We've known something was coming for years, she admitted. Strange signals, unexplained. Phenomena. Most of it classified beyond top secret. A few of us were briefed about the collective, but even we didn't know the full extent. What about the Varix? Olivia asked. Did you know about them? Hayes shook her head. That's new. And deeply concerning. The jet landed at a secure facility outside Washington. They were escorted to waiting helicopters and flown directly to the White House, though not to the building itself, but to an underground bunker beneath it. The room they entered was filled with serious-faced men and women, military brass intelligence officials, cabinet members. The president stood as they entered, flanked by security, but stepping forward to greet them personally. "I understand you have quite a story to tell us," he said, his voice. Grave Susan took a deep breath and began the story for what felt like the 100th time. But this time the fate of humanity truly hung on her words. She explained about Eridani, about the collective, about the Variks. She described the technology they had been given and the limited time they had to prepare. The room erupted in questions, debates, accusations. Some believed immediately, others were skeptical, demanding proof. Laura stepped forward, opening the cases they had brought. The technology inside was clearly not of human origin, the designs and schematics even more so. One general examined the detection device, his expression changing from doubt to conviction as he studied it. "This is beyond our current capabilities," he admitted. The debate continued for hours, Susan and Olivia answering questions, providing details. The president mostly listened, absorbing information, occasionally asking precise questions that revealed a quick mind, grappling with world-changing information. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. "The evidence is compelling," he said. "We must assume this threat is real and act accordingly." He turned to his military advisors. "How quickly can we implement these defense systems?" "Not quickly enough," was the sobering answer. "The technology, while buildable with Earth materials, would take weeks, perhaps months to fully deploy. We have less than 24 hours. Susan reminded them. The president nodded grimly. "Then we need to adapt. Our existing systems, missile defense satellites, early warning networks. They need to be reprogrammed using this new information." Orders were given, resources allocated, the machinery of government shifting to war footing. A global alert would be issued, carefully worded to prevent panic but clear, enough to prepare military forces worldwide. As the room emptied for people to carry out their assignments, Susan found herself standing with Olivia, Laura, and the president. "What happens when they arrive?" she asked, the question that had been haunting her. The president looked her in the eye, his expression resolute. "We fight," he said simply. "We adapt, we survive. It's what humans do best." Susan thought about what Eridani had said about human adaptability. Perhaps that was their greatest strength. "The collective believes in us," she said. "They could have simply saved themselves, left Earth to its fate. But they chose to help, even in a limited way." Across the globe, detection systems were being modified, defensive positions established. The Variks were coming, but humanity would not be caught completely unprepared. Susan was taken to a command center deep within the bunker, where she could monitor the global preparations. Screens showed military units mobilizing, scientists working feverishly to understand and implement the alien technology, governments worldwide being briefed, accepting the reality with varying degrees of shock and determination. Not everyone believed. Some nations refused to cooperate, insisting it was an elaborate hoax, or worse, a pretext for American military action. But enough did. Most recognized the existential threat when presented with the evidence. Susan watched the clock counting down. The Variks fleet would arrive within hours. There was still so much to do, so many preparations, incomplete. But they had made remarkable progress. Olivia joined her at the monitoring station. The sheriff had been working with military units, sharing her first-hand knowledge of Variks' weapons and tactics. "Do you think we have a chance?" she asked quietly. Susan considered the question honestly. "We have something the Lysithians didn't," she said. "Knowledge warning. Time to prepare. The collective has given us a fighting chance, but it's up to us now." On screens around them, the first detection systems came online. Specially modified satellites began scanning for Variks' energy signatures. Scientists worked to analyze the defensive schematics, adapting them to existing human technology. Humanity preparing, united in purpose, if not in perfect cooperation. Susan thought of her students back in Pinewood. Were they watching the news, hearing the carefully worded announcements about potential threats from space? Did they understand what was coming?